So we're going to have about half an hour from Kate. Kate Fellows, Head of Learning and Access, Leeds Museums and Galleries.
Yeah.
And also, I love the fact from last night. I'll leave you to talk about that. But yes, highly commended. Highly commended. So really looking forward to this talk. There's going to be time for questions afterwards. So any questions through the talk, save those and we'll come to those at the end. We're going to talk about risk-taking and organisational culture.
Yep.
Over to you.
Sandra. Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Well done for making it to 3 o'clock on day 2. I have to say I'm a little tired because I got into bed at 23 minutes past 1 this morning and then got up again at 6:30 because we were highly commended last night, and that's very, very exciting. Thank you very much. Thank you. And then I'd stupidly booked an 8 o'clock in the morning meeting in Hammersmith this morning. So I had to get up extra early to go and do that before I even got here. So if I turn into some kind of incoherent, gibbering wreck, just kind of nudge me. Somebody come up and nudge me, okay? But today we're going to talk about risk. There's the thing. Risk. Yeah, no, maybe just me. What do you think of when you think of risk? Do you think of personal risk, like jumping off a cliff, or in this case, lying on some grass, having a nice daydream, about to get run over by a lawn roller or a lawn mower? No, that kind of personal risk? Or do you think about organisational risk, where you might be climbing ladders and falling off things at work, or hazardous materials, or riots, or things that involve hazmat suits and the police, that kind of stuff? Or do you think about reputational risk, where we want to be more activist, where we want to be more political, and we might not be able to say what we want to be able to say? Any of those come to mind when you think about risk? Yeah? Well, those are the kind of risks that we take on a daily basis professionally, right? And they might make us pull faces like that, or that. These are all photos from our Discovery Centre store, by the way, and I just love that cheetah, who looks like, I've seen some things, man. I've seen some things. Okay? But what about the kind of risks then? If we're taking those every day, what about the kind of risks where we want to do something and our managers say no because we don't see it as a risk and they do? That's the kind of thing we're going to talk about today, and then how we manage that. So I've been doing some thinking about this, and I did a bit of research, because you can't stand up here and not having done your research, really, can you? So in terms of risk management, there are three different types of risk. There is real risk. This is the data one. This is the one that says there is a step here and 50% of visitors will fall down this step. However, if we put hazard tape on it, we can reduce it to 10%. That's the one that's driven by data, okay? There is inherent risk. That is the one that if you go swimming, you might drown. I go swimming every day. I have not drowned yet. However, there is an inherent risk in doing the swimming. Those are the two that we mitigate through risk assessments, workplace assessments, having wonderful colleagues who help keep us and visitors safe. However, I would say that most of the risk that we manage through our programming, and where our managers say no and we might want to say yes, is this one. That is perceived risk. And perceived risk is a really difficult one to pin down. So, because it really depends on what's gone on in your own life beforehand. Your own lived experience, your own prejudices and biases, where the information that you're judging on is coming from, and whether that's a trusted source. This one is the one we need to get right. This is the one we need to get right for advocacy and to be able to do the things that we really want to do, okay? And that's the one we're going to focus on. So if you're sitting here going, I really wanted to know about risk assessments, thank you very much, or how to do a workplace inspection, I'm sorry, I don't want to waste your time. You probably better leave now because I'm going to focus on the last one. Okay? Everybody okay with that? Yeah? Excellent. So we're not talking about CF50s. Oh, I didn't realize I'd done them all on a single click. Now there's a start. So I've done some talking. I want you to do some thinking. And yes, I appreciate it is 3:00 on a Thursday. I want you to think about when you've wanted to take a risk and somebody said no to you, and the flip side of when somebody's asked you something and you've gone, bit risky that, and said no to them. Just take a moment and have a think about those two situations because we've all done both of them. I know we've all done both. I've done both of them. You can note it down if you like, or you can just hold it in your head. I'm not going to ask you to discuss it with a partner or do anything like that. I know I'm a learning person, but I'm not going to ask you to do it. But we will just come back to it at the end. So hold on to those thoughts, okay? Now, in terms of a bit of context, you've already heard from Leeds Museums and Galleries, but context generally tends to be everything. So this is Leeds Museums and Galleries. This is my day job where I'm the head of learning. We have 8 wonderful sites across Leeds, about 1 million visitors, 1.3 million objects, and 194 staff. We are also the largest local authority museum service in England. And we're really proud to be a local authority museum service. Our civicness runs through us like a stick of rock, basically. However, Leeds City Council is a wonderful yet slow and steady local authority. Local authorities are behemoths of organisations, and the pace of change can be glacially slow or incredibly fast. So at the moment, Leeds City Council wants to roll out an entire new HR system, which includes recruitment and appraisals, and an entire new finance system within 6 months of each other. And as managers, we're all going, what do you mean nobody told us that before? Oh, really quickly, really slow, nothing in the middle. We also have, and hang on, my boss's boss is the CEO, and we've got 99 ward members, all of whom, whichever party they represent, have a different opinion on what we should do. Yeah, is that sounding familiar? For us in local authorities, for anybody else in the audience with local authorities, this will sound familiar. However, if you're in other situations where you have boards of trustees, you will also have potentially 12 people with different opinions, also potentially working really slowly. If you are a national museum and you report to DCMS, even bigger, even scarier, right? If you're even a volunteer in museums, somehow you will have committees to go through and you will have checks and balances in your governance that might slow things down. And in times of crisis, things slow down even more. People are more cautious because there's more on the line. So in times of financial pressure, like we've got at the moment, people go, ooh, that risk we might have taken 2 years ago, we're not doing that now. I don't want to do that. That's not right. Or, no. So how do we manage that? In Leeds, we've managed to navigate some of that cautiousness. And we've done lots of awesome stuff because of it over the last few years. And people have been asking me how we do it. And I've just been going, we just do it. It's just the kind of thing that just happens. Well, actually, it doesn't just happen. There are some conditions that you can create to make that happen. And that's really what I'm going to focus on this afternoon. So, creating the conditions for risk-taking. These are the overarching themes. I will delve into some concrete stuff in a bit. We have a culture of saying yes or yes if. Okay, and what does that mean? And what does that look like? Well, I genuinely can't remember how it started. We didn't sit down in a management team meeting one day and go, you know what, I think we need to say yes more. It just kind of happened, but then we noticed it and we made it part of our organizational culture. So I share it with you in a, you can do this too, more deliberately than we accidentally happened to start doing it. And I know saying yes sounds dangerous. It might sound overwhelming. It might sound like it might sound like you just get so much stuff. You go, I can't deal with this. But actually, that's where the yes, if comes into play. And we don't tend to get overwhelmed. And it's because of these 4 things. So trust is a really important thing. As a management team of Leeds, we are really clear about the direction we are going in as a service. Our strategic plan has care for our staff, for our places, for our things, running all the way through it. And care is the centre of what we do. Our staff get that, and therefore they don't bring us anything that doesn't fit with that. So we're more likely to say yes. There is also the key thing that they know that we want to say yes. So when any member of the team brings something, they know that my instantaneous reaction as a manager is going to be, yeah, okay, because I want to say yes. And that's a really clear thing you can do, and it's wanting to do it. In return, we ask and trust our staff to bring things forward that fit our direction and that they've done the thinking around it to mitigate some of the risks that we might see in the first place. And the yes, if comes into play. The conditions is usually about funding, partnerships, things like that. It's, yes, we want to do this, but actually you need to think about this. You need to think about this and need to think about this. The time that we say no is often where it's linked to staff welfare and staff well-being. If I see that one of my staff wants to do something and it's going to put too much pressure on them, I'll go, no. Or yes, if you stop doing this, or if you stop doing something else. Occasionally it's a no, but not always. Wider, strategically, within our local authority, we say yes to other council departments. We don't just say yes internally. That becomes increasingly important in a pressurised funding situation because we are making ourselves indispensable to children's services, to adult social care, to employment and skills, to libraries, and therefore we become harder to put savings targets against. So saying yes outside really helps us in terms of that advocacy too. The final key part to that trust bit is we are trusted to deliver. So the yes has to be a yes and carried through. It can't be a, yeah, of course we'll do that, and then you don't deliver. So that's where the yes, if comes in, if we have more money, if we have people, if this. That's the conditions. When we do say no, we mean no. Quite straightforward. I've thought about it, given it lots of consideration, but sometimes it has to be a no. And we give the reasons why things are a no when we can. So to give you a concrete example, a member of my team comes, they'd had a brilliantly successful project, gardening project at one of our sites, which was actually our 9th site. And if you were listening carefully, I said 8 sites a while ago. And he said, I want to do it again. I want to do it again. And I said, no, but right now I can't tell you why. A couple of weeks later, I could go back to him with a valid reason. And it was actually because that is a leased site from the Canal and River Trust, and we are handing back the lease. So we will not be running that site. But I said no to that site, but yes to the gardening project happening somewhere else. So it's the negotiation process. Getting the paperwork right. We only use accessioned museum objects in our learning programs. We don't use replicas. We don't use models. We do not have a handling collection. That is in our collecting policy. So therefore, we don't hire curators who aren't on board with that. Our curators' job descriptions involve learning. They have to talk to people. They have to share their collections with people. Our learning officers' job descriptions involve collections. Get the paperwork right. It mitigates the risk. So you're bringing down that perceived risk for everybody, and then you can recruit the right people to do the awesome stuff. And then finally, it's okay for things not to work. That's the other part of our culture that makes this work. It's okay for it to fail. It's okay for it not to work. We have an action research approach to things. We trial it. Something doesn't work, we tweak it. We do it again. We trial it. We keep going like that. Very rarely do we stop anything. The other thing is we don't tend to talk about projects. We tend to talk about pilots or trials and then programs, because that means things are longer running, embedded and established. So what does that actually look like in terms of concrete stuff? I'm now going to whistle stop through some projects. I'm not going to talk about the projects at length. I'll give you 2 sentences worth of context. If you want to come back to me on any of this, please do, but that's not the primary focus of this. So the Leeds curriculum is a place-based, arts-based curriculum that sits on mylearning.org. We've got a stand at D8. Come and see us if you like. It had 50 arts organisations input into it. It is taught in 100 schools in the city, reaches 10,000 pupils a year. It's phenomenally successful for raising attainment and giving kids cultural capital. However, setting it up was about lowering the perceived risk and convincing people it was a good idea. So how do we do that? I think you make your own luck in this world. It doesn't just land in your lap, but sometimes you can exploit serendipity to the best possible effect. So to get this off the ground, I needed to talk to the head of children's services. I couldn't get a meeting with the head of children's services or the head of schools in children's services for months and months and months. I didn't like that. So I asked a few folks, and I found out that he usually got a morning coffee from Costa in the Merrion Centre. So I lurked by Costa and happened to end up behind him in the queue. I went, "Oh, that's really nice to see you here. You know what? I've got something that'll really suit you, something you'll be really interested in." And I had my elevator pitch ready. So my 3-minute, this is what it is, this is what it can do for you, this is how it can solve your problems. And I had a meeting with all the people I needed within a week. I made my own luck. Little bit Machiavellian. I'm not necessarily suggesting you stalk people, but it got me what I needed. In the meeting I had a week later, I communicated in a way that it would be heard. So I'd used my learning skills as a facilitator to ask colleagues of the people who I knew would be in the room how they liked their information. I had it in a range of formats. I had images, I had statistics, I had quotes, I had research. And I gave each person, not that they knew it, their own personalised copy of the meeting notes, which skewed it to their learning styles. And they all said yes. So use those skills that we have as museum learning professionals or facilitators in a wider context to your best effect in terms of advocacy. The next one we're going to talk about is school curriculum planning. We run a primary school membership scheme, and we also run curriculum planning for primary schools. We act as paid curriculum consultants now in about 22 primary schools a year to throw up in the air their history curriculum and put it back together with them. This was about knowing the risks and frankly doing it anyway. This was the most terrifying thing I think we've done in the last few years. Because when a school says, "Please have my medium to long-term plans for my history curriculum that Ofsted are going to be looking at, that will form the basis of some of our Ofsted inspection. Please rewrite it for us." You go, "Yes, we can do that. Of course we can. It'll be fine." But what we did was we used our learning skills and we used our expertise wisely. So we didn't go, "We can just write it all for you." We went, "Let's sit down. We'll listen to what you need. We'll research the demographics of your school. We'll look at the national curriculum. We'll look at your statutory objectives. And then we'll have a discussion with you. And what we'll do is we'll ask lots of questions and let you come to your own conclusions. And then we'll write it for you." And that's what we do. We followed our gut on this one properly. We knew it felt interesting, and the member of staff who was doing this said, I want to do this, but I can't fit it in really. So I said, let's not do that bit for a while. We'll pause that and we'll follow this. So we followed the risky thing to do. I did support that member of staff to do it. I didn't just go, there we go. So we did lots of staff training, sent her on lots of curriculum-based courses, got her to talk to lots of Ofsted inspectors who I happen to know through some other things. And so she felt confident enough to do that. However, the risky bit was the nail-biting wait for the last 3 years until those schools have been Ofsteded. So we've been working with about 22 schools a year. And actually, as they've started being Ofsteded, the history curriculums are being mentioned in outstanding terms. Oh my goodness, was that a relief? Because frankly, if they'd have said this was awful, then we'd have just had to go, well, that was an experiment that didn't quite work. Let's try something different. But actually, it's working. Following our gut, using our questioning ability really, really worked for that. Careers for all. Oh, this is when risks pay off big time, and not just in a school sense. So Careers for All is our employability program for young people with neurodiversity and disability, living with that, where we have career aspiring activities and placements and all kinds of things that help get them the skills, life and work ready skills to get them into employment. This was concocted out of 2 different projects that were kind of working, but were better together. And this is when taking that risk of smooshing 2 things together really, really worked. We used the data wisely. So I used national statistics, I used research and all kinds of other things to put 2 programs together, hoping that the 2 of them would be bigger than the sum of the parts. And it's really worked. So in terms of Careers for All, this is no longer an art form funded project and program. This is funded through employment and skills funding from our West Yorkshire Combined Authority and through some levelling up money, because we've used the statistics and the data well to convince our colleagues within the council to be able to fund this. So the post and the programme sit within my team. Carl uses museum things to be able to do what he's doing, but actually the ripple effect is far bigger. To be able to do that, we're also solving somebody's problem. So again, like your elevator pitch, like being able to say, I can fix that for you, I can bring you those statistics, and being able to deliver, this spends some of the levelling up money they needed spending quickly. Big tick from employment and skills. But also it gives them the progression data from the young people back, and through in an arts-led way that the city wants to work. So we are solving their problem for them. And again, we're delivering on what we say we will. Interestingly, Careers for All is also having a bigger ripple effect across the council because the funding has come from employment and skills. Carl can legitimately go to their meetings and say, oh, by the way, you fund me. Can I have a chat with you about this? Can I have a chat with you about that? And the programme has impacted on the whole of Leeds City Council's recruitment process. So the accessible and inclusive practice that we've worked up through Careers for All, we've effectively been the experiment for the city, and that is rolling out across the whole of Leeds City Council's 20,000 employees. So that's pretty cool. But again, that's delivering on what we say we will and being trusted. Our community programmes sit slightly sideways for me, but I thought I would mention them anyway. This is mitigating risk by working together. We know when we work in a co-curated, collaborative way, and that we listen and we do it with kindness and care, then actually we have better results. And I would say, if you take one thing away, it's the kindness and care aspect. Everything we try to do through this, do it with that and do it with love, and you're probably going to be all right. However, in our community programs and our learning programs and everything else that we do, there is a big element of managing our staff well-being and the boundaries that come with that. You might notice I have incredibly high expectations of my team. I expect them to perform to a fairly reasonably high standard, but I also rein them back in if they are nudging at too many boundaries. They can't work all the hours in the day. They need to take breaks. They need to do things for their own development and their own love of what they're doing. And you can't get the rest of it. You can't get the rest of managing risk down without managing the risk to your staff as well. So do it with that staff well-being and that care at its heart. So what does all of that mean in a bigger context, kind of coming back out again? It means that Leeds is still supportive of its arts and cultural sector. It means that we are still at the heart of that as its museums and galleries. Because we're trusted, because we deliver, because we've managed to limit those perceived risks, we have a higher value and therefore wider support across lots of the council. It's stood us in good stead so far. We haven't had some of the massive cuts that other local authorities have. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm hoping that this approach still works. I'll leave that on a question mark. And I'm going to go back to those thoughts in your head. So the ones that we said at the start, when have you said no to managing a risk and when has somebody said no to you? Hopefully something that I've said in the last 10, 15 minutes, if you'd have thought about that and done something slightly differently at the time, you may have had a slightly different outcome. So I will leave you with that. Thank you for listening. Has anyone got any questions?
Kate, thank you so much. That Costa story, you're a terrifyingly smooth operator. You really are. But that was really fascinating. So we've got a good 10 minutes for questions. So I will come over to you with the mic if anyone has a question for Kate. Yes. If you could please say your name and where you're from and just hold the mic.
Thank you. That was really, really fascinating. My name's Laura Chasova. I'm from the British Library. A couple of things that you said really struck me. One was the idea that in times of crisis, thinking slows down even more. I think when you introduced what you do, you talked about the context, you said everything's in the context. Yeah, just be really interested to hear you reflect a little bit further on those two things.
Sorry, I need to go back to the mic. So, oh, that's weird. I can hear myself in my ear. Sorry, thanks for that, Laura. Yeah, I think when organisations are under pressure, they just get more and more limited. It's so much easier to say no to something. I'm going to take that out of my ear for now, because I can't listen to myself and hear myself. That's weird. They just get more like a pressure cooker, and that gets really, really hard, and it gets harder and harder to operate in. And then people stop asking because you just keep hitting blockers and brick walls. And the way you need to try and think of a way either around the wall, over the wall, or frankly, to dismantle the wall by taking the bricks out. You know, like Harry Potter taps a thing to get into Diagon Alley, taps a brick. I was thinking hopefully you'd tap a brick and it would all go, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't quite work like that. And certainly, I mean, Leeds City Council's always been more open than other councils to doing that. But I can see that kind of, the mood music's changed over the last few years, and the perimeters have come in a bit more, because we're big in the museum sector. We're tiny in terms of the council. So we kind of get away with a few more things being a smaller service within the council. We're not children's services or adult social health. However, in terms of other organisations, if you have a blocker in your organisation, it's probably because they just perceive the risks as different to you. So work out how they perceive it and work out how you can mitigate that risk and talk their language. We're very adept at talking different languages to different people. Certainly in terms of learning, I could step into a group of the early years I would need to think about it for a moment to see what questions I was going to follow for how to follow their learning, because I'm used to teaching adults now rather than kids. But you kind of adapt through the ages. Same with the people we work with, same with our senior leadership teams. They are just people. They are just like your participants. They are just like your visitors. They want their lives to be easy. So give them the information in the form that they want it. Does that vaguely answer the kind of question you were? Sorry.
Thank you. It's so hard with the earpiece, but it does. Thank you. I think it's that balance that you've spoken about a little bit around care, a little about understanding the kindness involved. Because I think when organisations are in a time of crisis, it's easy to forget actually above, I think, sometimes that human impact as well.
Although I would say we have lots of conversations around our management table about the welfare of our staff. My team and our collections team my team will always ask me how I am. So they understand the impact on me of making those decisions. And sometimes I think it's very easy to point upwards and go, they hate us, they don't listen to us. But actually, they're just as human as everybody else. And if you spread a culture of care, it should go through everything and upwards and downs. I totally take your point that sometimes it can seem that those decisions are quite removed from what happens to be happening on the ground. But I mean, we've sat in meetings around tables and hours worth of discussion about how to do something with kindness and with care. But when something actually comes out, you wouldn't necessarily know that had been an hour and a half's worth of discussion. Or because of another pressure that's being put on us, the decision we want to make isn't necessarily the decision we can make. So we have to toe the party line at times. And I've again sat around meeting tables and argued a case and argued a point. But actually, if everybody else around the table is seeing something different to me, then I have to say, actually, for the good of everybody else, there's clearly something that I'm not, or my line is so far over, I'm not going to get my way here. I'm going to pick my battles. That makes sense?
Thank you so much, Kate. Any other questions? Coming. I've got a question for you. Well, I'm sure there are others coming through. I think it's what you just touched on. I think there's something maybe expand a little more on that culture of care for yourself as an individual, trying to be the person doing this, because that's important, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's knowing your own boundaries and either living them, or if you can't live the values that you're saying, at least explain why you can't. I'm saying that very carefully because I know that my team over at the store with my learning has one of these and is listening into what I say, and they're going to go, you're going to say something and you don't live up to that. So I would always say to them, don't work in the evenings, those kind of things. And I know that I do, but I'm working flexibly and I'm not expecting them to be able to do that. And that sometimes there are times where you go, I need to be able to do this because there is a deadline to this, and I've just got all the deadlines are coming together, so I'm just going to do it. But actually, that gives me the fluidity to then be able to, on a Thursday morning when I've got no meetings in, go for coffee with my husband. When we're working from home, and I'm effectively just out of the office for an hour and a bit while we are having our own little well-being coffee somewhere else. And that evening working gives me the fluidity to be able to do that. I'm effectively fulfilling my contract and doing my hours. They just happen to be at different parts of the day. I know what boundaries I have. I know what keeps me sane. I know my own. When I know what my body feels like and what my emotions feel like if I'm reaching crisis point. So there's a lot of self-knowledge in there. But at the ripe old age of 42, very nearly 43, that has been a long time in coming. I didn't have that in my 20s. I probably didn't have it in my 30s. I think it's just life experience that you learn some of those things. Yeah. But I know that if I don't go swimming every morning, I feel worse. If I don't make things, whether that's dresses, stained glass, cookies, then I go a little bit crazy. I need to go into some green spaces at the weekends, and I need to switch off and have family time. And all of those things are my kind of non-negotiables. I spent most this weekend, with this week, also being on my phone and phoning home because my son is doing his SATs and I have mommy guilt for not being there. However, I'm probably not going to the GEM conference this year because it's his second week of secondary school. So I was like, I'm doing this, but I'm not doing that. It's making the choices to give yourself the balance and the time to be able to do things. So there's a lot in there about giving yourself permission to stop, or giving yourself permission to have the time for you, and expecting that of your colleagues, and explaining that and talking about it openly, and expecting that of your managers as well.
Yeah. Thank you. With such an open, honest answer. And it's about modeling that care, isn't it? Explicitly as a leader. So actually not sneaking off to have a coffee for an hour for well-being, but putting it in your calendar that you're having a coffee for an hour. Really useful. Thank you, Kate. Any final quick question? Yes.
Hi, I'm Emily from the House of Commons. Would you say that with your pilots or trials that you work more slowly as part of this risk management? Because I think a lot of times the struggles is, someone says yes and then they want it delivered in 6 weeks. So how do you build in the time to make sure you're being thorough enough, as it really sounds like you are, to give yourself the time to make a successful pilot or trial or program, I guess is my question.
That is a really good question. I think we all understand, certainly around the management table, around the senior leadership table, that things take time to happen. And I know there are other managers who go, I want it now. That sounds brilliant. Thank you very much. But again, it's how relevant that is in different situations. If you're working in a co-curated way, it is going to take years. And it's probably going to take longer than you think it will, even if you allow that amount of time. We have got to this point as a service because of stuff we put in motion 18 years ago. It's not an overnight thing. I've been at Leeds 15 years, so I've seen a lot of change. I hold a lot of organisational memory. And yes, there's an understanding that things will take time because of the experiences that we've had over that time period. And our managers have been in post, they've all been in post a good chunk of time, so they've seen cycles of that. And when we've tried it and tried to go faster, it just doesn't work. That's the other thing. You go, we'll be doing it again in 6 months' time because something won't work. So yeah, just knowing and understanding that. From your point in terms of making the case, I suppose it's being really clear to say, this is going to take longer. This is my timescales, and this is why they are so long. Yeah, being really open about it, a bit like with coffee.
Yeah. Brilliant. We're going to have to close there, but thank you again, Kate. That was just fantastic.
You're more than welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Hey.